I finally managed to get the cards for this heroic deck profile. I don't know if I should call it heroic challenger, heroic champion, but the boss monsters of this deck are the champions. But overall, this deck has been a deck I really liked ever since the release of the archetype back in, what was it? Return of the Duelist? I don't remember what the set was, but I just saw Excalibur and saw it was a 2,000 attack monster that could easily become 4,000. And I just really like that. But the deck got more support in Dimension Force, and I think it's really fun. Though I have yet to actually use it against anyone other than and practice duels against some of my other decks. But starting off with the monsters, I play 3 copies of Heroic Challenger Knuckle Sword. Knuckle Sword can be especially something from your hand if you control a Heroic Challenger monster that is not level 1. And then, if Knuckle Sword is normal or special summoned, you can have it target 2 heroic monsters on your field to have them become one become the same level as the other. So you can have it target another heroic challenger and either make both of them level 4 or both level 2 or 1. I don't know why I was about to say 2. But really, I only play this card in the deck because nostalgia reasons, also the fact that it can be a free level 4. Let's see. But the only downside of the card is when you use its effect, you can't attack unless it's with an Xyz monster, which is not a big deal. Because when I go over the extra deck, you'll see that everything in it is an Xyz monster. Then I play 3 copies of Heroic Challenger Extra Sword. Extra Sword is only in this deck as another heroic name for another monster later on. But it also has the effect of an Xyz monster that's Xyz summoned using this card's material. Gains the following effect of it gains 1,000 attack. So those units help to make your monsters bigger. But the reason I play 3 of it instead of just 1 is because I do play 3 copies of Heroic Challenger Thousand Blades. Thousand Blades has a not at all once per turn effect of you can discard while it's in attack position, you can discard a heroic card from your hand to then switch to defense mode and summon another heroic monster from your deck. Which it can summon another Thousand Blades. So if you see this and 3 heroic cards in your hand, you can easily summon all 3 of them and then an extra sword. But then it has the actual hard once per turn effect of once per turn while it's in the graveyard. If you take damage, you can summon it from your graveyard. But I mainly like it for the discarded heroic card. Then I play 3 copies of Heroic Challenger Morningstar. Morningstar is a free summon if you control 2 or more warrior monsters. And then you can only special summon Morningstar once per turn that way. But when it's normal or special summoned, you can then search your deck for a heroic. So you can add 1 heroic spell trap in your deck to your hand, which in this deck is 1 of 2 cards. But it's really good because this card can get you a searcher or a card that will ensure your victory in battle. Assuming nothing, it's actually like a Mirror Force. Then I play 3 copies of Heroic Challenger Double Lance. Double Lance has the effect of when it's normal summoned, you can special summon another Double Lance from, I believe it's, from your hand or graveyard in face-up attack position. So I just like this because if you see 2 or you see 1, you can search for the other one, and then normal summon 1, and then special summon the other if you have no other options. Otherwise, just another heroic name for Thousand Blades. But the only downside of this card is if it's used as Xyz material, it has to be for a warrior. Then I play 3 copies of Heroic Challenger Assault Halberd. Assault Halberd has a kind of a cyber dragon in the fact that if your opponent controls a monster and you control no monsters, you can summon it for free. And then it also has the effect of when it battles, it can inflict piercing damage if it attacks a monster in defense. And then if it deals damage, then you get to search for a heroic card. But it typically isn't staying on the field long enough to actually battle, as you're mainly using it for the free summon. Just summon this, then summon another thing, do a couple other things, and make a really big XYZ monster, and then punch your opponent for a game. But I realized I forgot to mention it, but this deck is meant to be a blind to go second, or at least my build of it. It can easily be a control build with different cards. I just haven't figured that one out yet. But then I also play 3 copies of Ash Blossom Enjoy Spring, just for the generic. It's still probably one of the best hand traps in the game. Moving on to the spells, I play 1 copy of Reinforcement of the Army to search for any warrior, level 4 lower warrior, which is the entire archetype except for the 1 copy of Heroic Challenger Warhammer, which I'm not playing in this deck anyway. 1 copy of Harpy Spellcaster to deal with back row, because this is meant to go second and then beat your opponent's face in. 1 copy of Called by the Grave to deal with you being hand trapped. 1 copy of Monster Reborn as an extender, being able to target 1 monster in either grave and then special summon it to your field. And then this could easily be cut to 1 or 2, but I still like it as 3 because, again, it is another heroic name. And that is 3 copies of Heroic Chance. Heroic Chance lets you target a heroic monster you control and then double its attack points, but cannot attack directly that turn. And you can only activate 1 Heroic Chance per turn. So I'll probably end up cutting it down to 2, and then toss in something like Rank Up Magic Variance Force or something like that to toss in either 105 or 101, which wouldn't be that bad an idea, because there not much in this deck locks you into warriors. Then I play 3 copies of Magnum Shield. Magnum Shield is actually a pretty good card in this deck, just by you can equip it to a warrior monster, and then that monster gains attack or defense points depending on its battle position. If the card is in attack mode, then it gains its defense points as attack, and then the same vice versa if it's in defense. So if you equip it onto something like Heroic Champion Gundiva, while it's in attack mode, it'll gain 1,800 attack points, giving it 3,900 attack. Or if it's in defense, it'll gain 2,100 defense, putting it at 3,900 defense. Then I play 3 copies of Heroic Envoy. Envoy lets you search for a heroic monster, and then if your life points are 500 or less, you can banish Envoy from your graveyard to then target 1 heroic card in your graveyard to return it to your hand. So, and then you only use each of the effects of Envoy once per turn. But the main thing I like about this card is if you have 2 in grave, but you haven't used its search effect, you can use one of the extra deck monsters to pay life points so you only have 500 left, banish an Envoy, return an Envoy to hand, and then get a search. Or you can use Envoy to return Heroic Chance in case you fail being able to OTK your opponent. But since it is a blind go second deck, I do play 3 copies of Regeki, just because of how most of the decks I face are mainly monster negate, but if they have spell trap negation, it's only like once or twice. But I really like this card because typically if I use it, I have a second one in hand, which against the decks that are mainly monster negation, this card's really good. The only downside of this card is if you have Heroic Chance, you don't want to use it because your opponent doesn't have any monsters in attack position to fight into. Although I have gotten the suggestion of trying to play Fairy Meteor Crush so that I can battle a monster in defense and be able to inflict piercing damage. But then to finish off the deck, I play 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. You can activate from your hand if you control no cards to target one effect monster your opponent controls and negates effects. Or if you activate while it's set on the field, it does the same thing, but it also negates spells and traps in the same column as it. Which I found out the hard way does count your own spells and traps, so if you use it set on your turn, be aware of that. But that is it for the main deck. Moving on to the extra deck. The first monster I only play in this deck because of it really being the whole reason I wanted to play Heroic Challengers with the level 1 monster. Just because I realized if I see 2 of those, I can normal summon 1. Or normal summon. If I see 2 of them with Assault Halberd, I can make this monster. Just in case I realize I can't actually OTK my opponent. Which is the 1 copy number 54, Lionheart. Lionheart requires 3 level 1 monsters, which is the only reason that it'll hardly ever be summoned. On all honesty, it'd probably be better to replace this with something like Utopia Double or something. But Lionheart has the effect of, while it's in face of attack position, it can't be destroyed in battle. And then your opponent takes any battle damage you would take from battles involving it. But once per turn, during the damage step, if it battles an opponent's monster, I think it's during the damage step. Okay. But yeah, once per turn, during the damage step, you can detach a material so that your opponent takes any battle damage you would take instead. So even though it only has 100 attack points, if your opponent has something like one of my friends who plays Numeron, if they have Numeronius in play, or Numeronius Numeronia, you can summon this card, attack into it, and then they'll take the damage you would have taken. So if it's Numeronius, they would have taken the 9,900. Or if it's Numeronius Numeronia, they would have taken the oh boy, I have to remember the math. 99,900 points of damage. So this is literally mainly in here in case my opponent makes a big monster or I can't OTK. Because it's just basically a shield that hurts your opponent. Then I play 1 copy of number 80, Rhapsody and Berserk. This monster can detach a material up to twice per turn. So then target 1 card in your opponent's grave and remove it from play. I like this card against Sky Striker just because if they have Engage in the grave, then you can just banish Engage or Widow Anchor or whatever you don't want them to be able to get back with Kagari later. But then you can also equip target 1... where is that effect? I don't remember if it can just target any monster or... Okay, then it has the effect of once per turn you can equip it to another Xyz monster you control, so then have it gain 1,200 attack points. Then I do play 1 copy of number 60, Dugaris the Timeless. Actually, I'm going to do it like this. Dugaris the Timeless has the effect of... It has 3 effects you can use by detaching 2 materials, but each one comes at a cost. Like, one of them, you can draw 2 cards, but then your next draw phase is skipped. You can special summon 1 monster from your graveyard in defense position, but then you can't normal summon the next turn. Or you can double the attack of one of your monsters, but then you can't attack. Your next battle phase is skipped. So you can use this to either get more resources or to just make a monster even bigger. Then I play 1 copy of Abyss Dweller just to deal with decks like Phantom Knight or Invoked-ish. Basically just turn off your opponent's grave effects. Then I play 1 copy of Comics Hero King Arthur and 1 Heroic Champion Gandiva. Comics hero King Arthur just has the effect of if it would be destroyed in battle, you can detach one material from it instead and then gains 500 attack points. And Heroic Champion Gandiva just has the effect of once per turn, if your opponent would special summon a monster or monsters from the hand, which I think has to be from the hand, or once per turn when a level 4 or lower monster or monsters is special summoned to your opponent's side of the field, you can detach material from this card to then destroy that special summoned monster or monsters. So I just like this because Pendulum is showing up a bit more, and this can just screw over an entire Pendulum summon. Then I play 3 copies of the original OTK machine of this deck, and that has 3 copies of Heroic Champion Excalibur. Excalibur can once per turn use 2 materials, so then makes the attack become double its original. So this is one of the few times you don't want to use Extra Sword to Exceed Summon. Because if you make it summon it, it'll have 3,000 attack. But then if you use Excalibur's attack points, it'll be changed to 4,000. And then return to normal at the end of the turn. Or at the end of the next turn. Because its attack boost lasts until the end of your opponent's next end phase. Then one of the monsters that is new that I don't remember all the effects of is 2 copies of Heroic Champion Clave Soulish. And then Clave Soulish has the effect of your opponent cannot target monsters for attacks except for this one. And with it just requiring 2 level 4 warriors, you can just make 2 and your opponent just can't attack. But then it has the effect of you can only use each of its following effects of this card's name once per turn, which is you can pay life points so that you only have 500 left. So at the start of the battle phase of this turn, you can double the attack of one monster you control. And when an attack is declared involving an opponent's monster, you can detach material from this card. Then target one face-up monster your opponent controls to have Clave Soulish gain that monster's attack points. So if your opponent has a big monster in attack mode, but you didn't need to use another Higeki, you can just use all your attack manipulation effects on Clave Soulish. Activate its effects so you only have 500 left. At the start of the battle phase, it'll double its own attack points. And then you can use its own effect by detaching material to when an attack is declared, so that it gains another monster's attack points. But I think the biggest I've managed to get this card to in testing is I have to think about this real quick. Let's see. I think the biggest I managed to get this was 38,000. Oh, I know, because then I attacked to a 5-head drag, so it really had 43,000 for no apparent reason. That was just one of the main reasons I loved this deck, is just because of how big I can get the monsters for no reason. I remember the highest I've ever managed to get Excalibur was 20,000. And that was just from having all 3 Magnum Shields and using an extra sword for Clave Soulish, not really for Excalibur. And then just Clave Soulish, then doubling the attack points. Heroic Chance doubling the attack points again. And then this Clave Soulish then adding an opposing monster's attack to its own. Then I also play the 1 copy of Heroic Champion Kusanagi. And then Kusanagi I just play this deck because of how it's this deck's best answer against trap decks like Altergeist and Eldritch. Which is us during either player's turn, if a trap card or effect is activated, you can detach 1 material from Kusanagi to negate that effect. And then Kusanagi then gains 500 attack points. You can only use that effect of Heroic Champion Kusanagi once per turn. But I just like it because it is a trap negation. At one point, my opponent didn't realize what it did, and their only option was to go battle phase and then end a battle phase evenly matched, which Kusanagi then negated. and then they just proceeded to lose because they had nothing. Because if I go first, I'm going to just try to make a Kusanagi and Gendiva. And then to finish off the deck, I play one copy of number 39 Utopia, one copy of Chaos number 39 Utopia Ray, and one copy of Shining number 39 Utopia the Lightning. Essentially, these two are just meant to, so you can make a 4-material Utopia the Lightning, which just has the effect of when it battles, your opponent can't activate cards or effects. And if it battles a monster, then during the damage step or damage calculation, you can have it detach 2 materials to then double its attack. Or to make it second 5,000 during damage calculation only. Yeah. But that is it for the extra deck. Moving on to the side deck. The only thing I wish about this deck, though, was that number, 86 Heroic Champion Rangomniad. I really wish that card was not still banned. I feel like it would be perfectly fine if Gossip Shadow were to be banned instead. Because then decks like Heroic Champion or Heroic Challengers would be one of the only few that can actually make it using 5 materials. Because this deck can actually pull off a 5-material Rangomniad somewhat easily. It just depends on the opening hand and whether or not they have enough heroic names to discard for extra sword. But if Heroics had that, then they would easily have a here's our first turn option. But the side deck can literally be anything. Mine's only made for my locals, which is 3 copies of Droll and Lockbird, just because there's a lot of branded, some of which is Despia, and they don't always search for the brand fusion first for some reason, so it just helps to stop that. Because all it does is if your opponent adds a card from their deck to their hand, except during the draw phase, then this just stops them from being able to draw or search cards for the rest of the turn. Then I play 2 copies of Nibiru, since there are a couple of combo decks, and you can easily just summon the token in attack mode, and then just, like Clay of Solace, just be able to OTK through it. So Nibiru isn't that bad. That's another option with this deck, is technically, instead of playing Raigeki, you can play Nibiru. Or if you'd rather play other hand traps, then you can also play Factory Land instead of Raigeki. And then because Mystic Mine exists, and my reputation of absolutely hating Mystic Mine, I also play 3 Cyclones, so I can banish it, target and banish it under Dimensional Barrier. And 3 copies of Twin Twisters, so I can deal with their back row or the Mystic Mine if they don't have a field barrier up yet. What I really want to do is also play 3 copies of Mystical Space Typhoon, just because I do really hate Mystic Mine. But I then play 3 copies of Ice Dragon's Prison, just to deal with decks like Sword Soul or Agents, or the overall Destiny Hero Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer. Also, I use this card to ruin Sky Striker a couple times. But essentially all it does is you target 1 monster in your opponent's graveyard, summon it to your field in defense position. Or I think that's speed and defense. Oh no. But you just target 1 monster in your opponent's graveyard and summon it to your field with its effects negated. And then you can banish 1 monster that has the same type from both fields. So, like, against Sky Striker, I can target their Sky Striker Kagari while they control Shizuku or Hayate or any of those, to then banish them both. Or what I did when my opponent went all of their resources into to making an access code. When they summon Selene and activate its effect, I would chain Ice Dragon's Prison, target their effect value on their grave, summon to my field, and then banish spell the effect value and Selene. So they had absolutely nothing they could do as far as making an access code. And then just because there are a couple Eldritch that show up every once in a while, I do play the one copy of Red Reboot. Just because it's a decent thing to use against trap decks. But like I said, the side deck can literally be whatever you need it to. Mine is just for my locals. But that is it for my Heroic Champion deck profile. If you have any ideas what I can do to improve the deck, any ideas of decks I'd like to see me make in the future, or any decks I'd like to see face each other, feel free to comment those below. Thanks for watching.